Good morning. Welcome in on a Monday to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
Hey, man.
We're live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as YouTube and Twitter. You can join us on the video stream there. Welcome into another week. I like some of those highlights, getting a little 49ers highlights in there, making me feel good, getting the week started off right.
Do you realize
San Francisco?
Do you realize the Bears are like one game
They're
out
not
of the playoff spot?
Bad. Like, they're not bad. I was actually thinking about that on the way in because Justin Fields is my fantasy quarterback. And
You're welcome.
I mean, listen, he's pretty solid, to be honest. And
in fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I love those QB rushers. But I'm kind of watching the Bears, and the last few weeks, I'm like, hey, they're actually not playing bad. And then
maybe that Montez Sweat signing or trade rather will pay off.
I was thinking about that. I was like, not that long ago, we were talking to each other, just asking, what are they doing? Why on earth would you trade for a guy that doesn't fit your window at all? Because you don't know what your window is yet. And all of a sudden, they're a game out of second place, 2 games out of second place in their division.
And if the Raiders, Shane, would have scored at least a point this weekend,
any points at all,
maybe
any points at all,
they'd be even in better shape because the Vikings would not have 7 wins.
Yeah. Well, they don't have Sebastian Janikowski anymore, so they can't have the standard, three field goals, so that they didn't get any points because of that.
3-0.
That's not good.
The first point was scored under the 2-minute warning, Robbie.
I was kind of just scrolling through scores to see what I missed yesterday, and I go, wait, what?
Yeah, it's a baseball score.
What happened? I'm glad I didn't spend any time watching that game. I saw enough of those in the Big Ten West this year, but my goodness, your Raiders, bud. Like, what is happening? Like, Shane, your Raiders, woof.
Is this that moment where I can be passionate?
Yep, go ahead. We were talking before the show about what you can and can't say when you're passionate, so that's why that joke comes up.
Yeah, it's a little behind.
Which, speaking of passion, Patrick Mahomes was passionate apparently about the wrong thing yesterday.
So I probably hold Mahomes to a different standard because of who he is, right? We kind of hold these high-end, elite kind of face of the league quarterbacks to a different standard. We hold them to the Brady standard, to the Manning standard, where I just need you to not complain about clearly correct calls. And listen, I get that what I think happened, the most generous explanation I think of what happened is that Patrick Mahomes has been so frustrated with his team all year, specifically the receivers, because of all the drops and all the inability to get open and all this stuff, right? That I think it just boiled over in that moment because he knows that was the right call. He knows the guy was offside, right? Like, it was literally the ref's response was, yeah, usually we do give a warning, but we couldn't even see the ball. He was so far offside. So we went ahead and just called it. Like, that was their actual explanation. And so Patrick Mahomes has to know this. And I think he's just been so frustrated and will not throw his teammates under the bus, which I appreciate, that he ended up lashing out at the refs in a situation where it's a terrible look. Like, you can't blame the refs for that loss. That's on you guys.
Well, so Tony, did he not acknowledge where he was? Like, I ask this question all the time when this penalty gets called. Did you not look over to the sideline and give the thumb up?
It doesn't look like he did.
And so he lines up
and looks like he's just dead ahead the whole time.
First off, you don't make eye contact with the official and say, hey, am I good? The second thing is, how do you not know that you're on top of the football?
Yeah.
Like, you are right there on the line of scrimmage. Like, you can look over and be like, oh, I probably should take a half step back.
Yeah, I might be a little aggressive here in my lineup.
What are you looking at? Are you just looking at Mahomes the whole time and you just think because it's muscle memory where you line up, you're good? That to me was a little mind-boggling. But we wouldn't be in the spot today, or Mahomes wouldn't even be arguing that if it didn't result in a touchdown or it result in one of a cool looking play,
a spectacular
where
touchdown,
Travis Kelce ditches the ball back to Tony and he runs it in for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
But the Chiefs were at a point in that game too where they're playing a good Buffalo team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, despite the record, they're still a good Buffalo team.
One of the most talented teams in the league.
It's one of those games that has some deep-rooted rivalries, at least as of late, because these are two teams that always match up in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a game that you want to win so badly that, in turn, can lead you to lash out on things that you probably would stay at home about more.
Yeah.
And so, all that being said, if I'm Patrick Mahomes, like, yes, you can, like, be frustrated about it, but you got to quit. You got to quit complaining about the little things until it's time to talk about them. And so what I mean by that is, when the game's over and you're going to shake Josh Allen's hand, how about you stop? Like, Josh Allen does not care that penalty was called against you. He does not care. And you're going up and saying, like, that was effing bullshit, this, that, and the other. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's just a cheap look with somebody that talented who's won that many games that you really, and that's why I think it's about something else. You know, a lot of times you see people lash out about something and you're like, what's happening there? I don't understand. And that's why I think it's about the season as a whole, about his receivers as a whole, about everything that's been going on this year that's been frustrating to him. Because, okay, this is one call in one game, and yes, it ended in a spectacular touchdown, but it's not like it was the last play of the game. They had time left. This was a situation where they put themselves in this spot. The only reason they're in this spot is because of the big thing, kind of going to what you're talking about. Until they fix some of the big things that are wrong with them, you kind of got to miss me with the little stuff that you're complaining about, especially when it wasn't a bad call. Like, I get it's a call that you don't like to see called if you're Patrick
Nor
Mahomes,
does it get called all the time.
often.
But
also,
how often are you lining up offside?
That's the thing is, how often is a receiver lined as far offsides as Tony was in that situation? Not very often. And so, I mean, I think I heard on some commentary that it's been called 11 times this year. It's not like it's never got called. Like, that's a little less than once a week. So not a ton, but also that's probably the most egregious instance of it that we've seen all year. The only reason anybody actually cares is because that specific play ended in a touchdown, and a rather spectacular touchdown at that. It's beneath Patrick Mahomes to act this way, though, because it's not just that he was mad about the call. He had a full-blown meltdown on the sideline. Like, game is still happening. Just a full
guys holding him back.
Yeah, I thought he was going to try. Like, was he going to hit a ref? Like, what's your end game there,
man?
At
first, I thought he was yelling at the fans.
I didn't know who he was yelling at until I kind of figured out more context of what was happening, because it was a little bit after the play. And so I'm just watching. It's like, what are you trying to prove here? Like, what is your end goal? If nobody holds you back, are you going to go get nose to nose with a ref? How's that going to end? Like, what's the plan here, big guy? And it's such a bad look to throw a full-blown temper tantrum on the sideline over a correct call, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like because sometimes I'll give a little bit of a pass when it's like, that was pretty bad. When you get one of those calls, one of those pass interference calls that you're like, I don't know about that, big guy, which is, by the way, a subjective call. This call was pretty cut and dry, like black and white. Like, the dude was lined up.
He had about 10 seconds to make up his mind if he was going to throw the flag or not, because that's how long the play clock was. Well,
and
as
he
it's
was
ticking
just
down, you're just looking at
there.
Tony like, are you going to move back? Are you going to stay there?
Are you going to check with me at all? Like, what's happening here? And Tony's just like, yep, we're good to go. Like, no, you're really not, bud. So I expect more from Patrick Mahomes, and maybe that's not fair. But to be fair, I think I expect more from just most adults in any situation, not to have a full-blown tantrum in that spot. So I don't think that's asking a ton.
Well, I just know that based on how he was reacting in that moment, there's some deep-rooted frustration that has just kind of been sitting there for a long time, and it was just waiting to boil over.
Yeah,
and that was his boil over moment.
Yeah, that was.
He'll come back to earth. today.
I hope so.
He'll come back to earth today. He'll
Yeah.
let it go. He'll move on because he's a player.
Yeah.
And sometimes as a player, when you're frustrated, you lash out, as I already said, but then you let it go. And you'll see Mahomes let it go because his personality is not what we saw in the last minute. Now, did he go too far? I think so. When I say he went too far, Josh Allen doesn't care. Shake the dude's hand, walk off, and then complain about it when you get to the podium. But Josh Allen shaking your hand and you're just gonna complain about the call. What is Josh supposed to say? He just kind of looked at him and then walked off.
Yeah,
because it's well, no, it benefited us. Why would I agree with you that is not what should have been called in the moment? To me, it's a little ridiculous. But again, it wouldn't have been a big deal if it didn't result in a cool play. It would. Whatever anybody else thinks out there, if you're out there tweeting miss me with the Chiefs get every call and miss me with this is something that should have been a warning and not a flag. If Travis Kelce didn't lateral that ball, and when I say lateral, more like a pass.
Yeah, it was a straight up throw.
If he didn't pass
he
that
was
back,
channeling his college quarterback days there,
and that didn't result in 6 points. And it only resulted in a Travis Kelce first down.
Which, again, nice play, not a highlight.
I don't think this would be as big of a deal.
We're probably not talking about it. The other thing, let's not pretend like the Chiefs left tackle hasn't had a false start on every single play this year. Can we just talk about that for a minute? I mean, if you're going to complain about a call that was obviously correct, I think you have to acknowledge, hey, we've gotten away with somewhere in the neighborhood of 900 false starts this year on one guy, and everybody's just kind of cool with it. So maybe you don't really want this thing called by the letter of the law, Patrick. Maybe that's not what you want here for the best thing for your team. It was, I don't know, like I said, it was just super frustrating for me.
I'm looking at the view from the top right now, and Tony is literally a yard in front of the football.
Yeah, it's an egregious.
The center is behind the 49-yard dash.
Yeah.
And Tony's foot is on the 49-yard line.
Yeah, he is.
What is he? His helmet is nearly touching the defender.
Yeah, he is looking. I think he is. I think the defender closest to him and him, if they just walk towards each other, would hit each other. And the defender's not offside or not lined up offside. So I just really don't like that look from Patrick Mahomes more than anything. And, it is what it is. He doesn't owe me anything, but it's a super hypocritical look. It's a super, honestly, I like Patrick Mahomes a lot. He's super fun to watch, but that kind of stuff is like a loser mentality to me. I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a loser mentality. And that's a fan mentality, to be even more clear, and not calling fans losers, because I do the same thing, right? But if you're in it, you have to process the game a different way than I do watching on my couch, right? DB would talk about this all the time. He's like, I try not to process the game as a fan. He's like, so I understand when fans get frustrated about this and that or whatever, but I process the game like a former player, like an analyst, like a coach. And so most of the time, I don't agree with the fan emotional take. That's what Patrick Mahomes was doing. You're not just not a fan. You have control over the outcome of this game in a way that nobody else on the field does. And you're complaining about one of the few things that's not in your control, the refereeing. It's like, hey, maybe focus on the things that you're in charge of, because it's not like he played a perfect game. It's not like the Chiefs played a perfect game. And at the end of the day, I think what this is really about is he's so frustrated that he doesn't have any receivers that he likes. It's Kelce and no one else, right? He's been frustrated with these guys all year long, and I think it finally just sent him over the edge. But he still can't say, well, my receivers are trash. What do you expect from a bunch of trash receivers? Which I think is what he wanted to say. I think deep down in his heart, what he was really mad about was yeah, of course he lined up a yard offside. This guy is garbage. Of course I'm upset and frustrated. My receiving core is garbage. But he can't say that out loud. So instead he loses his mind at the refs.
It'll be something he moves on from, though, because he's battled adversity like this his entire career. When has he had like a really good starting wide receiver outside of Tyreek Hill?
Yeah, I mean,
it's been the Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce show.
Yeah.
So this is the first time he's been faced with adversity like this, where he hasn't had that number one star wide receiver on the outside that can bail him out of almost every situation, because Kelce has kind of dipped off a little bit. I'm not saying that he's still not one of the best tight ends in the league this season, but he hasn't been as dominant as we've seen
aging.
him in the
aging.
past.
Yeah.
Right. And age catches up to you. So until they start putting guys around Mahomes that can actually be effective, you're going to get responses like this out of Mahomes. He's not used to losing this much.
Yeah.
He's not used to seeing all the L's pop up in the column like this.
And losing in a way that's a game that they should be able to win. If you're trying to win a Super Bowl, that's a game that he needs to be able to win, and they weren't able to do it. So yeah, I think we'll probably see some sort of him walking his statements back at some point. But I mean, not that it matters, but this is very clearly to me one of those things where he's acting mad about the thing that he's not really that mad about.
Well, and this has me thinking, and this is actually a perfect tie-in to things that we'll talk about today, but it has me thinking about the Angels a little bit. Okay. The Angels are a team that they're built on superstars, right? Like they get Mike Trout, best player in baseball, right? You have Ohtani, who was arguably, as of today, the best player in baseball, right? But with that Trout situation, which is the most unique, it's where he was born and where he died, right? But when was the time, or at least the last time, you saw Trout get overly frustrated vocally in the public about the Angels organization and things not going right in a game? You don't see it.
No, I would say I'm not sure I've ever seen any emotion on Mike Trout's face at all, ever.
Right. And now half the season he's hurt because today it's just he's just kind of fizzling out. Well, his body, as you said, catches up to you at that age. It's catching up to Ohtani.
Father
Let's
time
be
is
real.
undefeated.
But two, it's kind of like one of those situations, like when you're on a team that is overly frustrating to either watch or be a part of, sometimes those emotions just get the best of you.
Well, and they come out in ways that don't totally make sense, right?
But you have to, as a player,
yeah,
you have to hone in. You're the leader of this team, Mahomes.
Especially as a quarterback. Like as a quarterback, it's a whole different deal.
You have to hold all of that back and let it go behind closed doors.
Yeah, you have to figure
behind it all. You can't have guys like us, a random morning show in Omaha, Nebraska, talking about you on a Monday.
Not like this. You brought up Ohtani. We will get to the Shohei Ohtani stuff, the $700 million man. The number still doesn't seem real, but it is. We will get to Ohtani. I also want to get to some Heisman stuff as well. But we've got a jam-packed show for you here today. Coming up at 8 o'clock, we're going to talk to Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Nebraska ball with a big win last night, bouncing back against
a win that I'll be honest, I didn't think was coming.
I didn't think they were going to get. They caught Michigan State at a good time because Michigan State is reeling right now, but they're still a dramatically better team than the team Nebraska just lost to in Minnesota. So that's a really big win for Nebraska basketball. Obviously, Nebraska volleyball headed to the Final Four. Congratulations to them as well. That'll be in Tampa, Florida. Coming up at 8:45, Callin Hake from Team Jack Foundation is going to be joining us.
Great organization.
To talk a little bit about Team Jack. At 9 o'clock, we're going to talk to Steve Wiltfong about some of the recruiting, transfer portal stuff. It's a busy time of year. He's the recruiting director for 24/7 Sports. And then we'll wrap up the show at 9:45 with Steve Gardner. He is a baseball writer for the USA Today. We'll get some insight on Ohtani and that as well.
And more around the league because there's deals all over the place.
Juan Soto gets traded to the Yankees. Like Alex Verdugo gets traded to the Yankees.
You guys got Tyler O'Neill from the Cardinals. You're welcome.
I'm not pleased. The Royals signed Will Smith.
Which Will Smith?
The Men in Black.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, there are two Will Smiths in baseball.
Yeah, and none of they're all both less famous than the actor. They're gonna go all Hitch on him. They're going that Will Smith.
Hitch.
Yeah,
All right, little Kevin James action.
just stay right here.
Hey, making the pizza.
You don't need to make pizza. They got food there. Those are the guests we've got coming on the show.
Q-tip.
We're also
Throw it away.
we're also gonna, I think, try and get to Shane's world. It's been a couple weeks. I know Shane really wants to play. He's been missing out on trying the jelly beans, so we'll see if we can.
If there's any left.
Yeah. So I got to tell you.
Are
this
you just
story.
over there snacking? What's going on?
I chose to play it on Wednesday.
Okay,
the day that you
gone.
were gone.
Yeah.
And Anna was in because I'm like, oh well, Anna's got to experience Shane's world.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
So I go over to get the box from Shane, and I just hear, oh, and then you just hear like little pebbles hitting the ground, right? But instead, in this case, it's jelly beans, and all it reminded me was Ross and Friends when he's like, "Oh, major shampoo explosion!" Shane dropped half the box of jelly beans on the ground.
Come on, Shane.
So now we have about like 7 left, which is why I sent in our group text yesterday. I wonder if there's a holiday edition, like for Christmas time.
Ooh,
which there is a naughty or nice, but I think it's the same flavors. But I saw on Amazon they have a spicy edition.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I'm up for that.
Come on.
I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't
right?
know.
There was the flavor palette was sriracha to jalapeno, and then it had like Carolina Reaper on there. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine eating a spicy jelly bean at 8:30 in the morning?
I cannot. I might pass on that. Coming up next, I do want to talk about the Heisman Trophy results. Little bit frustrated with how that thing went. I'll tell you why. Coming up next year on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. You can also catch us on YouTube where the comments are already popping off. Good morning, Travis, Thomas, Terrence. A lot of T's in the chat this morning. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys tuning in and being a part of the show. You can be a part of the show on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline, 888-638-4876. One of the things that I had been kind of wanting to talk about all weekend is the Heisman Trophy, which feels like it's not nearly as big of a deal as it was when I was growing up. When I was a kid, it felt like this enormous thing. It sort of almost felt, and that part of this is probably because Nebraska volleyball was playing pretty much the same time that the ceremony was going on. So at least locally, it took a back seat. But I think there's another problem as to why the Heisman sort of is fading away from importance. And so Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman from LSU, put up terrific numbers. Nobody's denying that. Incredible numbers, right? He had a great season. What I think the Heisman should be versus what it is, I think is where we're having a departure here. Because I thought Michael Penix should have won the Heisman. I thought he was the best player in college football on one of the best teams in college football and one of the best stories in college football. What I think the Heisman should be is more of a reflection of why that football season was important. Like, who defined that college football season? I get that it's the best player. I get that the criteria is pretty vague. But to me, if you want the Heisman to matter, it needs to the winner needs to be what that college football season was about. Like, when you think back to, and this is why it's different between like a Jaden Daniels and Johnny Manziel, right? When you think back to the Johnny Manziel season, Johnny Manziel was the story of that season. The upset against Alabama, the way he took the college football world by storm, all of this stuff, right? Joe Burrow is a great example too. Obviously, he had incredible numbers. He was on the best team, but Joe Burrow was the story of that college football season. If you're just going to go by numbers, go back and give the Texas Tech quarterbacks a bunch of Heismans. Like, go back and go give these air raid guys a bunch of Heisman, because the numbers are always going to be there for those guys, right? Even with Caleb Williams last year, like, yes, he was a very important figure in the college football season. But are you going to think back to last year and think, man, Caleb Williams, that's what I think of when I think of that college football season. Not really. And it's not, like I said, that's the reason I use Johnny Manziel as an example, is because it's not just the best player on the best team, right? Texas A&M wasn't the best team that year, but Johnny Manziel defined college football.
It's a good way to
year.
list it.
There's a really, we're going to talk to him tomorrow, Eric Crouch.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Crouch defined that 2001 season for much of the year, right? Even though Miami was the best team. Even during the season, I think we knew Miami was the best team. But Ken Dorsey wasn't really that guy. I think Clinton Portis was the running back. He wasn't really, you didn't have these guys that just stood out. Miami was just this juggernaut of a team. And so you think about the defense that they had, like Jonathan Vilma and Sean Taylor and Ed Reed, I think was still on that team. Like you had all of these NFL guys, but none of those guys defined the college football season the way Eric Crouch did. You look at Eric Crouch's numbers, they're good, but they're not crazy, you know? And so I wish they would take that more into consideration. I think part of the problem is you have too many voters and too many of them aren't dialed into college football the way they need to be. So the easy thing to do is to fall back on the numbers. Let's go to the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Nate wants to talk about the Heisman. Nate, what's going on, bud?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? How y'all?
We're doing good. How you doing this morning?
Yeah, let me turn my radio down.
You're all right.
Yeah, man. You know how everybody like to listen to their own voice and all that, man. But anyway,
only us psychos
man,
on this side of the chair.
I think the best player won, but I agree with you guys. Like I don't know if it's just because of social media or everybody has a podcast, but the Heisman Trophy just don't feel the same. Like it ain't as major. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It just like
it seems like it used to be a huge deal, and it's really sort of faded from that.
Yeah, you know how people used to tune in; they couldn't wait till the Heisman show came on. Like that was a holler, but it's kind of like an afterthought. But I think the best player won. He did it against the best competition, man. But I really want to talk about that travesty that happened at Kansas City yesterday, man. That was terrible. That was a terrible call. And that's one reason why I'm just starting to really tune out the NFL, because the referees are messing up the game, man. And I want to get y'all opinion on that. Thanks for taking my call, man.
Hey, thanks, Nate. Yeah, we actually opened up the show with that call, and I actually didn't find it to be that terrible. I mean,
it wasn't.
I thought it was the right call. Now, does it take away that moment? 100%. The moment was incredible. It was exciting, but it all started with the flag. Like you could see the flag right off the snap.
Yeah, it's not like they waited.
So I understand both sides. Let the guys play. Don't impact that moment, but at the same time, don't line up offside.
I was gonna say he was aggressively offside, egregiously offside, and you can't go back and legislate the game based on the results, right? You can't wait to see, well, was that a cool play or not? Okay, we'll pick up the flag. It's not like he threw the flag after the play happened. It was thrown immediately.
It wasn't like out there that officials gave warnings on that call. Because if that wasn't like a known commodity for these players, they wouldn't react like this.
No.
But it's the fact that, before they've given us, a warning, like, hey, Tony, back up, or, but most of the time it doesn't result in a touchdown like that either.
Also,
now, he threw the flag right away, so it was kind of like, well, if I can't see the football, then you're obviously offside, and it's a problem for me now. Yeah. Because I got to look at the line of scrimmage and see who's moving. And if you're impeding me, well, you're going to get flagged for it. So if it wasn't out there like, hey, sometimes we give a little bit of grace, sometimes we don't, this wouldn't be a discussion today.
Also, they give grace when you check. He didn't check. Like usually it's the opposite thing that we see. It's an illegal formation where they're too far off the line of scrimmage, where they're not on the line the way they're supposed to be. And a lot of times guys will point over, they'll check, make sure they're okay. Sometimes the refs will give them a thumbs up. First of all, the refs are under no obligation to do that. They are doing
even if they allow a warning every now and then. They don't have to give it.
Yeah, they're not obligated to do that. It's a courtesy that they give because they want the game to flow better. But if you don't check, first of all, what you want them to yell at you, be like, hey, Kadarius, you're not lined up right. Like, he's supposed to be shouting at you during the game? No. And secondly, it was so egregious. This is literally the statement from the refs was the penalty was he was so far offside we couldn't even see the football. So no, he didn't get a warning.
Going back to the Heisman talk too, I'm happy that I'm happy about the way you described it, because I think those were the words I've been missing over the last week and trying to figure it out. Because I don't know if people remember, just about a week ago, I said Jaden Daniels shouldn't win the Heisman Trophy.
I don't think he should.
And people kind of got a little bit upset because I was saying like he hasn't done anything to show his Heisman moment yet this season. Yeah. You look at what LSU has done. They were never in national championship conversation, and if they were ever, it was at the start of the year.
It was before when
national championship odds were given to open up the season. And then 2, you look at what his record was against big games against ranked opponents this season. They're 1-3, and that one win came against Mizzou way late. In Mizzou and them were dogging it out. It was a dogfight to the end, and it was what a separation of like 6-7 points.
So they got boat raced by Florida State to start the season. They lost a shootout to Ole Miss. They beat Missouri. That was their only ranked win of the season. They got beat up by Alabama. Like
all he did was stuff the stat sheet. And don't get me wrong, that's a good thing too for him, because he did some incredible things offensively. He put up some great numbers, but unless you also elevate your team, take them to a point to where they haven't been. That's what Michael Penix has been doing.
Also,
and so that's why I thought Penix should have won too. What was crazy to me was Penix wasn't even like the favorite all year. You look at the Heisman odds, and I was watching him closely. Bo Nix was ahead of Penix for the majority of this season, and Bo Nix didn't beat Penix not once, not twice. No, Penix got the better of Bo Nix both times.
Coming up next, we'll wrap up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
I'm here.
Last I checked, we're on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I know we've already been at work for over an hour, but I know some of you just getting going. You need a little pick-me-up. Go check out The Beanery. They've got 4 Omaha area locations, Gretna, Papillion, Ashland, and their newest spot over on 168th and Giles. They've roast their own coffee, locally owned and operated. If you're a hot coffee guy, iced coffee, frozen specialty drinks, they've got you covered. Or if you need to get a little snacky, muffins, breakfast sandwiches, even gluten-free and vegan options as well. The Beanery, serving people coffee. Wanted to get to some of the local news in college football here. It's been confirmed a couple times yesterday that Kyle McCord will be in Lincoln on a visit with Julian Fleming, both of the former Ohio State Buckeyes, former 5 stars, which I know lots of Nebraska fans are getting all tingly about, some former 5 stars on campus. That is a pretty major development for Nebraska, not just the former 5 stars, but being getting one of the top transfer portal quarterbacks on a visit and seemingly being in the driver's seat for Kyle McCord is a pretty major
development.
Yeah, it's a pretty major development for Nebraska. When this sort of transfer portal season started, I'm not sure many of us expected to be in on any of those top guys outside of Will Howard, because there was a little connection. There were rumors that, Adrian Martinez was maybe giving a little bit of love to Nebraska and trying to talk to Will Howard into coming to Nebraska. But as far as I know, not really any connections with Kyle McCord other than they went out, identified him as a guy that they think can help him out and might even get a package deal with him and a wide receiver. That would be enormous from Nebraska. From what I hear, they were in town yesterday and their official visit starts today.
Well, so Ravi, you mentioned something there about not being involved with those big guys. And I think what you mean by that is because of where Nebraska is today as a program, those big name guys wouldn't want to transfer to Nebraska because they aren't set up to be competitive in terms of a college football playoff run next season. Now, could something magical take place this offseason and, the young guys get caught up to speed earlier rather than later? And you could see that because of how strong the defense is and should be built. Yes, of course. But that's kind of the worry that you think about with these big name guys of they're not going to want to play at Nebraska because Nebraska just isn't there yet. But what I thought this staff did a tremendous job of was pushing that noise aside and just saying, no, I'm going to go recruit you because I can offer the same as these other schools, if not more than these other schools, to financially set you up.
Sure.
And to get you exactly what you're looking for. You're looking to play competitive football in one of the best conferences out there. And what it's forming into is becoming second to none, right? I mean, it's SEC football in the Big Ten, and then it's everybody else.
It's the Big Two, and then everybody else.
So if you're playing football in one of those, and Nebraska's a part of that, that can appeal to anybody. And so that's why you have to insert yourself into the top 4 portal quarterback conversations, regardless of what could happen, what could shake out. If Cam Ward ends up at Michigan, just say, who cares? You tried, you pushed, you put your foot on the gas with Cam Ward and you tried to get there, but you're not leaving anything to chance at all, because you are touching ground in the Kyle McCord camp, you're touching ground in the Cam Ward camp, the Will Howard camp, etc. You are covering your ground, and that's all you can ask of this staff right now.
Well, and I think, you bring up an interesting point, and I think it's something that fans talk about a lot with, well, would he really want to come to Nebraska, or would he really want to go to X place because they're not in a place where they're going to be ready to win a championship or whatever, right? And that's fair, because that is what some guys are super hyper focused on. I don't think Nebraska is a place you look at and say, oh, they can't win 8-9 games next year. If they have the right quarterback, they get their offense together, right? Like, that's not crazy. That's not out of the question, I don't think. What the reality of the situation is, and I don't know that we really give credence to this as much as we should, if you're not going to just a handful of programs, chances are you're not winning a national championship right now, right? And those programs kind of shift and change a little bit over the years. But if you're not going to one of, I'll call it 10 programs tops, the chances of you winning a national championship are almost non-existent.
I would probably
it's probably smaller.
Yeah, take a number smaller, probably like top 5 programs.
Yeah, and I'm being a little generous here, right? But let's call it 10 for the sake of
because of this season you have Washington and Texas.
Yeah, because this year was a little weirder, right? Florida State was in the hunt, right? Obviously they didn't make it, but they were in the hunt. Texas was in the hunt. They hadn't been in years past. Oregon was in the hunt until late. They hadn't been in years past. This is, usually Notre Dame is in that conversation. They had a little bit of a couple down years since Kelly left. But you can go to almost every other program in the country, and deep down, you probably know, I'm probably not winning a national title. That doesn't mean you can't win at a super high level. That doesn't mean you can't accomplish your goals in terms of putting on really good tape for the NFL, setting yourself up financially for the future with NIL. Like, there's a lot of other things you can accomplish and still win at a really high level. And I don't, we talked about loser mentality earlier this morning. I don't think it's a loser mentality to be realistic about a situation and say, hey, unless I go to Georgia, Alabama, one of these schools, the chances of actually winning a national title probably aren't that good. We're still going to try and win at the highest level. And if things break our way, maybe we can get into that 12-team playoff because it's more accessible now than ever. But I think if you're being realistic, like, Cam Ward didn't go to Washington State thinking he could win a national title. Like, let's be real. That's not a thing that was happening, right? Will Howard.
He was transferring from FCS
to FBS because he was trying to play Power 5 football, and good for him. His next transfer, he might have a chance to win a national championship, right? Whether he goes to Michigan or Florida State or wherever else.
But like Kyle McCord started at Ohio State because he wanted to win a national championship.
He wanted to win a national championship, and now he's kind of getting pushed out because they like the guys behind him a little bit better. And so is he like, okay, am I going to go to a Washington or somewhere like that where does Washington have a chance to win a national title after Michael Penix is gone? I don't know. Maybe.
Depends on who they bring in, which
Depends
is
on who they
Will
bring
Rogers,
in.
right?
No, Will Rogers going to – oh, yeah, it is Will Rogers. Sorry, yeah, I was confusing Blake Shapen to going to Mississippi State with Will Rogers leaving Mississippi State. Because the portal gets
it's a little crazy sometimes.
Yeah, a little Twilight Zone-y sometimes for me. But you're losing Adunze at wide receiver. You'll lose Penix. Like, you're losing a bunch of guys. If Washington's in the playoff next year, I'd be pretty surprised.
Well,
if they're in the top 4. If they're in the top 12, I won't be surprised.
And who's to say you can't be Mizzou at Nebraska?
Sure.
Missouri has Brady Cook and they have Luther Burden. And then they have a really good running back in Schrader, but he was a walk-on and just became a really good running back. He's just a workhorse. He reminds me a lot of I'm going to take a Nebraska tie here, but in the NFL, he reminds me a lot of like a Rex Burkhead, like somebody that is just an absolute downhill runner. And so why can't you be that? Like that's I think where Nebraska could strive next year by getting a guy like Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming in the room.
Here's some guys here's some teams that were 9-3 last year. Arizona, that's not a scary team. They're good. They were well coached. They got better throughout the year. Arizona played in a really good Pac-12. Hey, like a really good Pac-12.
Good teams win.
Yeah.
Great teams cover. And that's Arizona.
Arizona was a great team. But they go 9-3. You're telling me you've got a lot of guys coming back on defense. I think the defense is going to be maybe even better next year because you've got young guys on the defensive line maturing and getting another year in the system. You can't tell me that Prince Will and Cam Lenhart aren't going to be better next year as sophomores instead of true freshmen. You've got I've heard that Gifford is coming back. I don't know if it's been officially announced yet, but if you've got Gifford back in that kind of nickel spot, in that rover spot, yeah, that's a huge piece for them. And you've got a bunch of guys that you like and a bunch of guys in the second year of this defense. You could convince me that the defense could be better next year. So if the offense is even functional, you're telling me they can't get to 9 wins? I mean,
it's a tough schedule. The first 7 games are
very
reasonable
manageable
wins.
Very manageable.
But the bottom 5,
they're
to
tough.
get 2 out of 5 from UCLA, USC, Ohio State, and then you have Wisconsin and Iowa.
Yeah.
It's still possible to get 2 wins in that group.
Wisconsin and Iowa are going to be about the same level as Nebraska. They pretty much always are, right? From talent-wise, we saw it this year. Those games go down to the wire. Those are on the table for sure. I'm not 100% sure what USC and UCLA look like next year. I really don't know. You're going to be losing Caleb Williams at USC. UCLA's was kind of down this year in a bit of a
replacing Dante Moore.
Replacing Dante Moore, so they don't have this 5-star that they thought they had coming back next year. You're in a situation that's a little bit tricky for both of those teams. And by the end of the year, those teams might be a little beat up in the Big Ten first year go around, right? So yes, that's a challenging end of the schedule. I don't know that it's going to be as daunting as it looks on paper. Maybe it will be. It might be worse, right? If Wisconsin comes back up, it might be a little bit worse than it is on paper right now. But I think there's a chance that there's 2 wins in that 5 pretty reasonably, maybe even 3. But my point is Arizona, Louisville, NC State, Oregon State, who we raved about, Oklahoma State. You're telling me Nebraska can't be in that range of teams next year with a real quarterback and a functional offense? You can't convince me they're not. And that puts you basically somewhere between 14 and 18 nationally. Nebraska would take that, and all of a sudden next year, you're knocking on the door. At 14, you're knocking on the door of the playoff next year. That's a place that Nebraska could be if this goes their way. Coming up next, we've got Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. We're kicking off our number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and we are brought to you by Dyer Law. Dyer Law has you covered. If you've been hurt in a personal injury accident, you can count on the Dyer Law team to provide you with a helping hand when you need it, no matter what you're dealing with. Call the Dyer Law team at 402-393-7529 or visit dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's DYER.law. Joining us now is Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, how are you this morning?
Good, guys. How are you?
Hey, Sam. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, same here.
We are doing well here. Let's start with Nebraska basketball. They got a pretty massive win yesterday. I know Michigan State the name and jersey is a little bit more impressive than Michigan State, the team this year, although a lot was expected from the Spartans. But how important was it for Nebraska to get back on the winning track after the way they lost that Minnesota game?
Important, for sure. Yeah, I thought going into this stretch, going 2-2, which means they got to beat K-State, going 2-2 was going to be really, important to their NCAA tourney hopes.
Mm-hmm.
And they might still go 2-2. I mean, they got to go to Kansas State and win there. It's probably the second best team they're going to face in this stretch. But they got an important win last night, and I think they saw that if they do the things that their coach wants them to do, and more to the point that they do it for 40 minutes, good results will follow. And so he'll be able to use this game as an example of, remember when we talked about this, and remember what we did against Michigan State. So he'll be able to use that as sort of an object lesson. It's an important win. This is a team that I think should make the NIT and could make the NCAA tournament. It's got to fall right. They got to win the right number of games. They probably got to get to 20 wins, I think, to feel good about an NCAA tournament berth. But NIT takes about 17, and I think they can get there with some ease. And I thought they played well yesterday, and they withstood the pressure and all the rest. Michigan State obviously is very good, and their coach knows it. He's taken this bizarre stance of principle to not play their 5-star freshman forward. He didn't play last night. Hard to know why. Very few coaches can get away with that, but I think he's not going to have much of a choice. He's going to have to play that guy going forward. And if that guy played last night, I don't know. Maybe they won. It's hard to say. It's really strange what Michigan State's trying to do or attempting to do, but Nebraska doesn't need to worry about that because they won the game.
Sam, before the start of the season, you could probably say Nebraska got the wins backward. Minnesota should have been the W, ended up being the L. Michigan State should have been the L, ended up being the W. In this game, though, in particular, because playing a Tom Izzo team, any Tom Izzo team, whether it's this year or ones of years past, not coming in with any momentum is a very difficult task to then ultimately end in the win column. How important was Nebraska's bench yesterday? In particular, Sam Hoiberg's defense and CJ Wilcher's points.
Important, yeah. They have depth. That's the one thing they've got that other teams in the Big Ten, a lot of other teams in the Big Ten do not have. They've got options on the bench, and they're not going anywhere for the calendar year, if that makes sense. So, those guys. I mean, Boogie Coleman's not going anywhere. This is his last year, so he's going to play, and he may not play every game, but they've got an opportunity to use him if they need him. Sam Hoiberg's not going anywhere, so if Sam has a game where he only plays 3 minutes, well, so it goes. I mean, Sam will play 17 the next. So they've got depth, and they've got depth that's sticking around for the balance of the season. They don't have to ask a lot of their true freshmen. I do think Eli Rice is going to be a very good player. Probably needs to, loosen up defensively a little bit, be a little bit more active there. But he's going to be a good player. So they've got depth. It should serve them well. I think it should serve them well. Thought it served them well last night. Was Alex hurt? And this was a game, and Izzo mentioned it after the game. This was a game where I don't know that they missed Alex too much, because Michigan State's post play is not very good.
Mm-hmm.
There will be games where they will miss Alec a great deal, and they need to get him back for those games. And K-State may be one of them. K-State's isn't tall, but they're physical. So I thought they could play without Alec last night and be okay, because Juwan Gary offers some opportunities that just make the team better offensively. But the depth is crucial to this team, and they're going to be. They're going to be tough to beat. I don't know how many wins it looks like, 17, 18, 19, but they're going to be very competitive this year, because if one guy's having a bad night, you can put him on the bench. You can try somebody else, and you might get a better result. And last night I thought, they brought in CJ Wilcher. Bryce Williams wasn't his best game. Might have been one of CJ Wilcher's better games. So that kind of stuff happens.
Sam, you mentioned the ability to kind of try out different guys based on who's having a good night, who's not. How sustainable do you think that is to not necessarily have kind of that go-to guy as the Big Ten season wears on? I know we kind of think of Tominaga that way, but that's not always how he plays.
I think it's sustainable. I don't think it's a league full of top-end players. Probably the best player in the country plays for Purdue, but, after that, there's just not as many. Now, again, there are teams with good players. Terrence Shannon's a really good player and could be an All-American. Jameer Young doesn't play for a great team, but he's an All-Conference player. But you don't have a bunch of teams with 3 or 4 guys, and you don't have that team with a Murray, a Kenyon or a Keegan Murray. So, I think it's sustainable. I don't think the league is overwhelming. I think there's going to be opportunities to win games. There are teams that you look at and you're like, that's going to be hard. I think Illinois is going to be hard for Nebraska to beat. I think Illinois has a lot of the pieces that make it hard for Nebraska to beat them. I think Northwestern is going to be hard for Nebraska to beat, but I think it's sustainable. Casey is who he is, and he had a real nice game, I thought. Hit a couple of threes, and the one thing he does is he makes the defense worry about him. You can't just let him beat. You got to kind of follow him around, and that's good. And I thought Rink Math played a game that it was a good Rink Math game. That's the kind of game that you need to see from him all the time. The most important, a very smart coach once told me, the 2 most overlooked things of a coach, and this is ironic, but it really is scoring and defensive rebounding. And the point that person was making is coaches can harp and focus so much on every other little intangible that, man, is it nice when you have somebody who can put it in the bucket and who can clear the glass when a team misses a shot. And I thought Rick Math did a really good job of the latter. And of course, then he had the assist. This team needs defensive rebounding probably more than anything else. They've got guys that can score. They can put it together on any given night. Juwan Gary is doing that. I don't know if he's going to do it all season, but Juwan's playing quite well offensively. So what you need is guys that can clear the glass defensively, and I thought Math did that. Rick Math does not need to score 17 points a game. He doesn't. If he scores 10 or 11 or even 9, you can live with that. That double-digit number as a rebounder is what you need from him. And if he does that every single night, this team's going to be tough to beat because rebounding is what Nebraska, deep down, what Nebraska needs is great rebounding. And I thought last night they got it.
Sam, I'd like to switch gears now to football. As we know, some big visitors set to visit Nebraska. Kyle McCord, Julian Fleming. We know conversations were had with Sam Levitt, Cam Ward, Will Howard, although if I were a betting man, it seems as though Nebraska is the favorite to sign McCord as of right now. Do you think a pocket passer is the right move for the Huskers, or would you rather see someone that has the ability to create with the legs as well?
Well, anytime you can get a pocket passer who moves, you'll take that. Oh, but if you're asking me, would I rather see Nebraska get a Kyle McCord or go get a guy that runs around a lot? I'll take the pocket passer. I think, and here's why. I think it makes the rest of your team have to step up what they do, and it empowers your receivers and your running backs and your tight ends and your linemen, because it's like, listen, this guy's going to stay in the pocket and he's going to be a distributor. We're not going to ask him to run 13 times a game. Those carries are going to go to our running back, and our wide receiver, and we're going to throw the football like a normal throwing football team. And you know what? Players like that. They want that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this guy's going to stay in the pocket. He's going to throw me the ball. I like that. They like. Now, there's nothing wrong with Patrick Mahomes. That's ideal. But you don't always get that. And you can't always easily predict who that's going to be. Like, you can see the athleticism of Sam Levitt, but what you don't know is whether Sam is Bo Nix or he's, not. Like, he's below that. He's a guy that isn't very accurate, or you just don't know. You don't know if he's Power 5 athletic and accurate, or if he's Group of 5 athletic and accurate. Upside for a Sam Levitt, maybe a Tanner Mordecai. And I thought Tanner Mordecai, when he was healthy at the end of the year, or healthier, that made Wisconsin a pretty good team. I thought Nebraska played arguably its best game, very close to its best game of the year at Wisconsin. And Mordecai beat him. He just outplayed him, and that happens. But so yeah, I think McCord is a good pick. It shows that Nebraska is very serious about getting better, because McCord's not going to go to some place where he cannot be a pro-style quarterback. I mean, he's going to go somewhere where he can throw the football 30 to 35 times a game and prepare himself for the NFL, because he only has the 1 year left. So, Nebraska, if Nebraska's serious about that, then they're going to be serious about trying to devise that kind of offense, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but we'll see what happens.
Sam, is it fair to say that the system that Marcus Satterfield wants to run dramatically favors a more traditional drop back passer?
Well, I think it favors somebody, who at least embodies those skills. Again, if you can get the mobility, that's a bonus.
Oh, Sam, we lose you there? Shane, did we lose Sam?
Might have. I'll check for him.
All right, let's try and get him back there. So the point of my question there was with, I think some of us are having a hard time envisioning what we saw on offense this year and saying, well, Kyle McCord isn't going to be able to run some of those plays. It's like, yeah, I don't think Marcus Satterfield wants to run those plays again. We heard him talk about with the option specifically, but I think more than that, I think the overall look of what the offense isn't really what Marcus Satterfield wanted to do. I think they adjusted to it because of who they got in the portal. I don't know if Jeff Sims was handpicked, or we have him, Shane?
Yeah, we have him back.
I don't know if Jeff Sims was handpicked or if he was just the best they thought they could get. But Sam, we got cut off in the middle of your answer there about the Satterfield offense. But to give context again, I think sometimes Nebraska fans are having a hard time because they probably didn't see a ton of Satterfield before, imagining a Kyle McCord in the offense that we saw called this year. And I guess I just don't think they have much interest in calling many of those plays again.
Right. Yeah. What I would say is that, if you look at the run game that Satterfield wants to run, and the pass game that he wants to run, it's a pro-style passing game and a pro-style run game. I think that they inserted the option mid-season because they were playing Harvard and they had to maximize his skill set. And, again, there is certainly a time, and it may be 2 or 3 years from now, where you can look back on year one, and we will know in 3 years' time whether year one was an unfortunate situation where they held themselves back because, they did all these other things, or if it was just, a blip on the radar. And we're going to find that out. If they sign McCord and he comes to the football program, and then they go into next year and they throw the football, 20, 35 times a game, and they run it, however many times. Let's say they run it 35 times and they throw it 35 times or 30 times. You'll know. But this was the worst pass offense in the Big Ten, or darn near. I guess Iowa was worse. It was one of the worst pass offenses in the country. It's going to be very, very hard to attract running backs and receivers to this kind of statistical output. And one of the things that I think is absolutely true is if you look at the teams that might have made the playoff, right? So we're expanded out to the 12. Look at the passing numbers for those teams and tell me if Nebraska fits into that. They don't. And so, it is what it is. the option stuff got him to 5 wins. It was a nice novelty story for a little while. You're not going to win the Big Ten doing that. Again, I mean, the fun thing about all of this is that the division is gone. It is over. And so now it's about winning the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about going and beating Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Washington, USC, Penn State, UCLA, Wisconsin. Good luck doing that with the triple option. Not going to do it. Not going to win it with the triple option. Not going to win it with the triple option. So, you know, you gotta. It's time. Like, it's really, really time. And we'll see what they. I think they know that too. Like, it's time to join everybody else. Missouri and Iowa State, and Kansas State. Yes, even Colorado and Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, all the teams that used to be in Nebraska's league, they all know how to do this. Nebraska needs to learn how to do it too. They got more resources than arguably every school that I just rattled off, with maybe the exception of Oklahoma. But I think they got more resources than Oklahoma in some ways too. They got more resources than every other school I mentioned, though. Time to find a quarterback, time to throw the football, time to be a grown-up offense that's not relying on, you know, quarterback power on 3rd and 4. Grow up, and they will. They will. They know it. They get it. They'll do it. You know, they had their mulligan year with the offense. That's all you can call it, is a mulligan. But you're on the team. Again, on team number 1, dog leg right, whatever you want to call it. Put it in the fairway. Put it in the fairway. And they will. I think they probably will. That's why they're going after McCord. If the answer had been, well, let's go get Sam Levitt and have him and Chuba and Heinrich compete for the starting job, and we'll see who wins. We're going to run it a little, and we're going to throw it a little, and we're going to rely on the, you know, this and that. Maybe it'd be one thing, but no, they know. I think they know what they've got to do, and it's not going to be, easy. But you know, I think they're trying. This is an attempt. They only get McCord for 1 year, though. So if you're going to do this for 1 year, who's the guy that's coming in after that? Who you're going to rely on after that? I don't know.
Sam, you mentioned kind of expanding out to the 12 teams, and I look at the teams just outside of that range. I look at an Arizona at 14. I look at a Louisville at 15, an NC State at 18, an Oklahoma State at 20. And I look at that and I think to myself, okay, is it crazy to think if the McCord thing works out that Nebraska's in that range next year?
It's not. No, the schedule would tell you it's possible. The schedule says it's possible. The first half of it, anyway. No, it's not. It's not impossible. That's within the realm. You got to win. You know, I think again we can be pretty realistic about this. You have to win at least 9, and preferably 10 to be in that conversation. You know, an 8-14 would have a hard time getting in it. So you know, you got to find those wins in there. But yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly components of this team that make it possible. They'll have enough players back on defense. I don't have the final 5 games in front of me, but obviously the final 5 are hard and very challenging.
Yeah, it's some order of UCLA, USC, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa.
Yeah, that's not the hardest it could be. I wouldn't want to play Oregon next year. I think Oregon's going to be. I watched quite a bit of Oregon this year and quite a bit of Washington with them joining the league. And I know UCLA. I've watched Chip Kelly for years. But that's not the hardest schedule you can have. I wouldn't want to mess with Oregon over the next 3 to 5 years. I think they're going to be really, really. Their roster is terrific. Their coaching needs to improve, but their roster is outstanding. So you know, I mean, it's manageable. It's fun, right? Like, it's interesting to ponder this stuff because McCord obviously has a lot to prove. He's got a lot that he wants to prove based on, you know, what happened at Ohio State. You know, they got great media covering that program there. They really understand their team. And I think nobody was super sold on McCord all season long. And I think, you know what that's a byproduct of? That's a byproduct of how good the quarterbacking has been there prior to his arrival. Because if you put on the film of Kyle McCord and then you go put on the film of, you know, Kent Graham or Joe Germain, or pick a name from
Craig
the 90s.
Kenzel.
Yeah, he fits. He sizes up well to the names that I just mentioned. Like he's more than capable of being Joe Germain, or yes, or Craig. Yes, yes, he's a Jim Tressel era quarterback. And what has changed in that program is that they had, and I mean, I've got a love-hate affair with Justin Fields, but Justin Fields is really talented.
Phenomenal college quarterback.
Yeah, and he's talented, really.
Yes.
Especially when he's got time to throw. But Stroud and Fields and even Haskins, the late Dwayne Haskins, had things, tools that McCord doesn't have. And so, but as a college quarterback, I mean, Iowa would love to have him. I mean, Iowa would take him tomorrow. They have their own guy, Cade McNamara. But I mean, there's a lot of things about this kid that are very quality, and he's going to have a lot. He's going to be very motivated coming out of a place that I think kind of ran him off. And I think he probably feels like, really, well, I didn't have that bad of a season, and I had to endure a lot of criticism, Ryan Day, when in reality, there's things about your team that aren't as good as they were when you took it over, and that's absolutely true too. Ryan Day's done a fine job, but he has not replenished Urban Meyer's talent along the offensive side of the ball, and so McCord will have a lot to prove. Nebraska's got to convince him that they're the right spot for him. He's going to have to meet the receivers. Julian Fleming's probably going to have to like the place too. So there's a lot of variables involved.
Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, good stuff this morning. We appreciate your time as always.
Take care.
Thanks, Sam.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Yeah,
I'm wondering if you get Kyle McCord, does that put Nebraska right in the middle of the pack next season amongst all Big Ten teams? Are you closer to the top? Are you kind of in between the top and the middle? Because I don't think you're below the line.
That's an interesting question. Let's tackle that next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as the YouTube and Twitter streams. We are brought to you by our friends at Dingman's Collision Center. Dingman's has been in business in Omaha for over 25 years, family owned and operated. First place best of Omaha for 18 years running. They've got 4 great locations throughout the metro area, and they invest in the latest technology to stay up to date with everything they need to work on whatever make and model you have, everything from Fords to Teslas. They also invest in the community. They give back with every car repaired. Go check out dingmans.com for more information. You brought up an interesting question with Kyle McCord, which this is we're doing a hypothetical here. We're not reporting that he's signed or gonna sign or whatever. I think Nebraska's in a good position for him. But if Kyle McCord ends up at Nebraska and is their starting quarterback next season, you ask, where does that put Nebraska in the pecking order of the Big Ten? Am I getting the question correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. So you asked, are they any lower than top half?
Right.
I certainly don't think they're below top half. So we're looking at, let's do a little thought exercise here.
But you have Oregon with Dylan Gabriel, who they're going to be top 3.
So it's going to be Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. I think we'll all be ahead of Nebraska. That's 4 teams.
And I'd probably put Oregon above Penn State.
That's fine. I'm not doing an order here. Just teams that I think for sure are above Nebraska, right? So that's 4 right there. Do we think Washington? We don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be. They're
projected to be Will Howard. I would say yes, above.
Above, okay. Because I don't disagree. I'm a big Kalen DeBoer guy. Don't disagree there. So that's 5 out of, we're talking 18 teams, right?
Isn't that crazy?
Is that that's the right number, isn't it?
The Big 18,
but still called the Big 10. Are they gonna have the Big 10 logo, but put a little dash in the 0 so it looks like an 8?
No, they're just gonna square root the 10. Not square root. Put a 2 up in the corner. That's not how it works.
No,
the big one.
Not at all. That's all
right.
That's all right. It's fine.
I'm trying.
So we got 5 teams
it's
there.
early. It's Monday.
So 5 teams there.
Right. I believe you're still above.
So you've got USC and UCLA are the other two additions,
right.
which I really don't know what to make of either of those two teams, because I don't think USC is built well to transition to the Big Ten. You're without Caleb Williams. USC is really interesting. UCLA, again, I think they'll be competitive. I don't know really what their quarterback situation is going to be. They did take a step back this year from what they were 2 years ago with DTR as a fifth-year senior.
Defensively, that should transition better, though, than
UCLA should, yes.
USC.
USC, even so, one of the things that I think we'll probably get to in the sports cleanup is, so USC is hiring Matt Entz away from North Dakota State to be not their defensive coordinator, but as a linebacker coach / associate head coach. Super weird move, but for Entz, I mean, because the last handful of guys to be in that North Dakota State head coaching job got FBS head coaching jobs. So to not even take a coordinator role, I think is really strange. Although I'm guessing they backed up a Brinks truck for him. But so you've got some new pieces in there in terms of defense, defensive coaching staff for USC. But with the way Lincoln Riley coaches offense, that's always going to be a challenge. We don't know what the USC quarterback situation is going to be. I'm imagining they won't be as good as Caleb Williams, because Caleb Williams has been incredible.
Caleb Williams was a Heisman winner. Malachi Nelson was the 5-star in that room that was a part of that 2023 class. Although Miller Moss was ahead of him on the depth chart this year, I'd expect Malachi Nelson to elevate from the third string role to the top role. But as we see in Texas, Arch Manning is still listed as the third stringer, despite being a 5-star too. I haven't seen enough of Malachi Nelson to know any different than what the depth chart tells me. But as of right now, Miller Moss is ahead of him. Yeah, and so you don't know, is USC going to try and get somebody out of the portal as well? We know they were active on some of the bigger names. So USC's quarterback situation, I don't know what that looks like. You would think if they were really confident in either of those two guys, in Moss or Nelson, that they maybe wouldn't be quite as active in the portal as it seems like they are. So that's going to be interesting to see what's going on at USC. So let's put one of those teams ahead of Nebraska, but not both. We'll split the difference there. Okay.
So that's 6 for sure.
Okay.
And then I think you get into a range of teams that you say, yeah, Nebraska's probably in that neighborhood. You've got your Iowa, Wisconsins of the world. You've got, without Tagovailoa, Maryland's taking a step back. I think Rutgers is probably, if Nebraska's got Kyle McCord, I think Nebraska's better than Rutgers.
Absolutely.
I think they're better than Michigan State, obviously. Indiana, I think they're better.
Michigan State will be interesting as they try to build something with Jonathan Smith. They already got that transfer from Oregon State who would backed up DJU, that Chile's.
Andres Chile, I think.
Yeah, Chile.
But again, remember now, I don't know it'll take as long, but because Oregon State's a really hard job, but it did take Jonathan Smith 3 years to get it going at Oregon State. So I don't know that I expect a super fast start with Michigan State, especially because that program's kind of been a dumpster fire a little bit. So I think next year, Nebraska's probably ahead of Michigan State. I think they're ahead of Purdue. I think they're ahead of Illinois. I think they're ahead of Minnesota. I think no worse than top half.
Max Brosmer, transfer going to Minnesota next year.
I think no worse than top half. Was he
New Hampshire?
I think he was New Hampshire. So I think no worse than top half. And I think you could talk me into as high as.
There are teams in that top half to kind of go into what you're thinking about right now, where you are above USC, where with Kyle McCord,
you could
be above USC.
You could be above UCLA. You could be above. Honestly,
I'm not saying Nebraska's top 5.
No,
but Nebraska sure as heck isn't any lower than 9.
You could talk me into them being above anyone except those big 4, the Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, because I do think there might be some flux in Washington, where not that they're going to be bad, but that they might take a little bit of a step back. You could talk me into anyone except for the top 4. I think it's likely after the top 5, but
the hard part is, where do they sit either in front or behind of Iowa and Wisconsin, because that could significantly drop you out of the top half
absolutely.
if you have Wisconsin and Iowa above you. However, what I saw from Iowa this year, and yes, they were without Cade McNamara, but they still weren't lighting the world on fire with Cade McNamara.
No, they were
and
not.
What I saw out of Wisconsin, which was a broken team that somehow, some way found a way to get the better of Nebraska in that football game, in a game where Nebraska didn't have a good, solid quarterback, a good offensive foundation for themselves to win that football game. That right there tells me if you insert Kyle McCord, you're better than Wisconsin. You are better than Iowa.
Absolutely.
And it's just that. You beat Iowa with Kyle McCord. You beat Wisconsin with Kyle McCord. That's why I would sit Nebraska above both of those teams, because you don't take as big of a hit on defense as a lot of other teams around the Big Ten and nationally may think Nebraska will, with all the returners and by retaining Tony White.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you look at the schedule next year, or you look at the schedule from this year, I should say. With Kyle McCord, do they beat Minnesota? Yeah, absolutely. With Kyle McCord, do they beat Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Iowa? Yeah, absolutely. The only games that I look at that they probably don't win with Kyle McCord are Michigan and Colorado. The way Colorado was playing in that game, I think they still lose. And I get the schedule's different next year, but all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, 9-3 is not crazy. Next year, because let's say they win 6 of their first 7. Then you win 3 out of 5 on the back end. If we're saying they're better than Iowa and Wisconsin, that's 2 right there. And then you just have to beat either a USC or UCLA team that we have no idea what they're going to look like. Like, it's not crazy. And that's why landing Kyle McCord is so important. Because
or a top named
someone in that neighborhood of Kyle McCord, because it all of a sudden makes you a serious football team again. When you're trotting out Heinrich Harburg last year, you weren't really a serious football team. When you were trotting out Jeff Sims after what we had seen from him, you weren't really a serious football team. Chubba Purdy, it was tough. I didn't think he looked that bad, but you're trotting out a third-string quarterback. You're not really a serious football team at that point. You trot out Kyle McCord every game, you're a serious football team all of a sudden. And I think that puts Nebraska at least in the top half of the Big Ten. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Callin Hake from Nebraska and the Team Jack Foundation. That's coming up next to wrap up hour number 2 on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We are wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. A reminder, using your seatbelt saves lives and prevents injuries, but only if it is properly worn. Make it click. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We are pleased to be joined now by current Nebraska women's basketball player and Team Jack representative, Callin Hake. Callin, how are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to dive right in here. How did you get involved with Team Jack in the first place?
Yeah, so I have a near and dear connection with pediatric cancer. And so when I got on campus through Nebraska's life skill opportunities, I mentioned that, and they got me connected with Kylie at Team Jack. And it has just been such a pleasure to have Team Jack here in Lincoln.
So you mentioned that you had that previous connection, and I don't want to dive too deep into your personal life, but based on Team Jack's mission, how did that kind of match up with your overall feelings and experiences coming in?
Yeah, so I actually lost one of my best friends to glioblastoma back in 2017. And so Team Jack mission really just aligned with my values and what I want to do for not only pediatric cancer, but also brain cancer, and just bring awareness because it's very underfunded and just not talked about quite enough.
Callin, so you mentioned how you got involved. What exactly is your role with Team Jack, and how do you help out with their mission of trying to bring some more awareness and fundraising to pediatric cancers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think number one, I just get wonderful opportunities like this. Being a Nebraska athlete in this state brings you a great platform, and I just want to use that for the greater good. And so with that, I'm able to attend different events and be a speaker, and also do a ton of their radiothons just to promote their cause.
It's an inspiring story. I went and attended the Team Jack Gala last year, and just seeing the amount of support that the organization brings is incredible in itself, but also just the player support across the board. What does it mean to you to be a part of that umbrella of whether it's former players or current athletes that is supporting a cause like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's so incredible. At the end of the day, all of our sports come to an end, but unfortunately, we currently don't have a cure to cancer, and so that's something that's going to be ongoing. So if we can use our platform for a greater cause, and hopefully one day praying for a cure, that's truly what we're here to do, and our sport's just a bonus.
We're talking with Callin Hake. She is a member of the Nebraska women's basketball team, as well as a representative for the Team Jack Foundation. Callin, I'm curious, you're from Minnesota, you're from kind of Big Ten country. How did you end up deciding you wanted to come play basketball at Nebraska?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the saying, like, there's no place like Nebraska, really hit home when I came on my first visit here. And I truly just fell in love with the coaching staff. But this university does a great job. You're more than an athlete here, and I'm very content with the ball stops bouncing someday. And I need to be set up for success outside of sport. And this university and this coaching staff here at Nebraska really sealed the deal.
You mentioned the coaching staff. Amy Williams has been incredible for this program, and just seeing how Nebraska women's basketball has been elevated year after year. Some pretty good players on this team as well. And I want to kind of ask this question in connection to Team Jack or maybe a variety of other charities that you guys may be connected with. Is this something that is just a you thing? You're connected with Team Jack, or are there other athletes on this team that were previously involved, and then that's how you got involved too?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually had to go out of the team to get connected with Team Jack. I originally saw it with a ton of our football guys are involved with Team Jack. And so I was connected outside of it with Kate Frazier, who runs our life skills.
And then quickly, how important is your involvement to you? Like, just how important is it? Maybe not just to you, but for you to spread the awareness for other people to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so important to me just to know that these families aren't going through it alone, that they have our prayers and hopefully also their some financial help, and that we're just praying for a cure, but also fundraising for a cure, and just being able to come alongside of them and hopefully bring some joy and light in such a dark and uncertain time. It really just holds a near and dear spot in my heart, and I'm just grateful that I get to be a part of Team Jack.
All right, Callin, before we let you go here, I do have to ask, so I know that you were the Nebraska women's basketball lifter of the year for this year.
Oh, heck yeah.
What is your favorite, what's your favorite lift? Like, I was a power lifter for a little while. Like, what's your favorite lift when you're getting in your workouts in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love front squat. I absolutely love the pain.
I would say, oh, you're a sicko. You're a sicko.
Yeah, but when you rack that bar, I love the feeling of that accomplishment.
You've obviously got more flexible shoulders than I do. I could barely even get the bar on my shoulders like that. No, that's awesome, though. That's impressive with all the work you've been putting in, not only in the weight room, obviously, but on the basketball court. And
the only thing I lift is my Beanery coffee in the morning. That's about it.
And with Team Jack as well. Callin, before we let you go, is there, if other people want to get involved with Team Jack, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just go to the Team Jack Foundation on your smartphone, and there's a wonderful website where you can donate, hear about the cause, and see some events that you can get involved with. We're always looking for more volunteers, and just to help these families know that they're not going through it alone. That's
Callin Hake. She is a member of the Nebraska women's basketball team, a full-fledged sicko when it comes to the front squats, but a great member of Team Jack Foundation as well. Callin, we appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks, Callin.
That's Callin Hake. She is a sophomore guard for Nebraska women's basketball, involved in the Team Jack Foundation, as so many Nebraska athletes, both past and present, are. Man, front squats. That's wild. If you
not only that, the women's basketball team and their success this year has been wild.
Absolutely, yeah. They're 8-2 on the season on a 4-game winning streak, playing some good basketball. I gotta say though, front squats. If front squats are your favorite lift,
dude, front squats are so hard.
Like you enjoy some like there's some pain. Like,
I remember when I was first getting into
they're terrible
CrossFit lifting.
Oh, front squats are the worst.
Back squats, I'd be like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna throw some like 45s on the bar. Then I would like go up to like another, because I couldn't lift. Like, I mean, you look at me, I don't lift like Ravi used to lift, but I could get 2 45s on both ends, and then at one point I got 3 45s on both ends, which was pretty good for me. Good. But then you go to front squats and it's like 2 25s on both ends. And that's it. That's like all I could ever do.
I can't even, like, I wasn't kidding. Like my shoulders are so like immobile. Like I had to use.
Yeah. Cause what do they tell you to do? Like get your elbows.
Yeah. They want you to like throw your elbows through.
Like shoulder width to the bar.
I can't even do that. I'd have to use lifting straps, and then I'd hold the straps to keep the bar in place. It's a little cheat code that I learned.
People underestimate, like, it looks easier than it actually
is. So
is.
hard. I like, if anybody who knows the people that love front squats are like
nut jobs,
full on sickos. That's why she knew as soon as I said it. She knew. You heard her laugh.
Well, because she goes, I like the.
She liked the pain.
She said, I like the idea of putting on the weight and then looking at the bar and being like, yeah, I'm about to do this.
Yeah,
that's essentially what she said.
It's a challenge.
That's what she enjoys.
It's so and it good on her, because she's got more mental toughness than I do, for sure.
And that's why she's playing a sport right now at the Division I collegiate level, and we are not.
TK says, gotta love front squats. Only us sickos love front squats. That's right, TK. That's right. Corey says, every time I front squat, I can barely walk.
That's more up my alley.
They're brutal.
That's more
they're
me.
Brutal.
TK, Ravi, Callin.
Oh no, I'm not interested in the front squat.
Oh, okay, never mind. So TK and Callin are the crazy ones, and Corey, I vibe with that right there. So I can barely walk after a weekend of reffing. So I know front squats will put me out for at least 2 days.
Man, it's been it's kind of a stark contrast when I realize like what takes me out after a couple days of being more active versus what I used to do, and I'm like, oh god, those years are coming fast.
Hey, also, no joke, and I'm kind of a car snob, but right now Team Jack has an enter to win a 1972 Chevy Corvette convertible.
Oh yeah,
and it looks sick.
It does look
sick.
It's
a Stingray, and oh my goodness, whew, is this thing something I'll be entering to win?
Oh, absolutely.
When I know it goes to a great cause, give me 65 tickets. I'll donate $100. It's better than
so. Is that like gotta love vets? Only us sickos love vets.
I don't think so.
I don't think they're the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
I don't really know what's happening there.
Vets and squats.
Unless you mean the veterans.
I don't know what you're talking about, Shane.
He's meaning Corvettes.
Go check out Team Jack Foundation. It's teamjackfoundation.org to find out more. And go under events. You can sign up to win that 72 Corvette that our guy Andrew Rogers was just telling you about. As we
enter information, Ravi, do you have a credit card that I can use?
Not on the air.
Oh.
We are going to talk to Steve Wiltfong next. He is the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
Hey, man.
We are live from Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the H&H Chevrolet stage. And we are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as KFOR for this third hour in Lincoln. We're joined now by Steve Wiltfong of 24/7 Sports. He is the director of recruiting. Steve, how are you this morning?
Good morning. Doing well, man. Just trying to keep up with everything. Early signing period is fast approaching. Transfer portal has taken shape, taken off, and over 2,000 players, I think, in the portal right now. Guys are starting to declare their college future. So just trying to keep up with everything, man. How about you guys?
You're telling me you're busy this time of
I
year?
was
Come
gonna
on,
say,
man.
Steve, we
way.
appreciate you joining us because it is just about the busiest time of year for you, I'd imagine.
Well, what I would say is it's the time where there's the most eyeballs on it. I think
Right.
that I feel like I'm no more or no less busy than I am at other times of the year, but the fan interest this time of year is higher as schools put the finishing touches on their recruiting classes and they're hitting the portal hard, and these fans want to know what this roster looks like moving forward, particularly at Nebraska. I mean, you guys are a program that have been in a lot of close games over the last 3-4 seasons, and it just seems like every single time it goes the opposition's way. But Matt Rule and company recruiting the class here, hitting the portal hard to try and get you guys back into the postseason and beyond. He's a program builder. Did a phenomenal job at Temple, greatest head coach in Temple football history. Then went to Baylor, took them from the drudges all the way up to the conference hierarchy and into a New Year's Six bowl. And it's only a matter of time before Coach Rule and his staff get it ripping and roaring at Nebraska. He's too good of a football coach. The track record's there. Like the players that are recruited, and thought Nebraska played hard each and every Saturday. And I know they're already gearing up towards having a great spring camp and beyond.
Steve, I'm curious, you mentioned all those close losses, not just under Coach Rule, but going back to previous staffs as well. But, one of the names that's been tied to Nebraska, obviously, is Kyle McCord from Ohio State. He's on a visit here in Lincoln this week. If let's just hypothetical, right? Say Nebraska lands Kyle McCord or somebody in that neighborhood. In your mind, as you kind of look at the rest of the roster, the talent that they've brought in, the talent they've developed, especially on that defensive side of the ball, do you look at Kyle McCord as a true difference maker for Nebraska in the sense of it takes them maybe not just to postseason, but maybe closer to that 8-9 win mark? Is that on the table in your mind?
Well, I just think with Kyle McCord, if Nebraska is able to land a player like him out of the portal, you're getting a young man that's seasoned, that's played in some big games, that's going to be tough and knows how to prepare, and a guy that could be a great leader as well. Ohio State, they got one of the best cultures in college football. I think they have a great coaching staff, and he had a chance to be under those guys for 3 years, and then he wins the starting job this past year. Shows the grit and toughness to go on the road at night and beat Notre Dame under the lights with a game-winning drive. Completed over 65% of his passes this year. Took care of the football. Some of those interceptions, he only threw 6, were not his fault, and so I think that he would be an exciting pickup for Nebraska, would certainly upgrade that quarterback room, and it's the most important position in college football. And I think that Nebraska was limited at times with what they could do because of what they had under center. And certainly those guys, there were times during the course of the year where Jeff Sims and Purdy and those guys did make some good things happen. But I think the consistency that you would get out of the quarterback position with someone like Kyle McCord would certainly raise them several levels. And then, obviously they've added a lot of speed on both sides of the ball with what they've done on the recruiting trail and in the transfer portal since they got here. So Kyle McCord would be a massive pickup. Nebraska swinging big at that position in the portal. They reached out to everybody, and I think that they're invested. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Kyle McCord moving forward.
Steve, you mentioned at the start of the interview that this isn't any busier than a normal day for you at this time of year because, it's just kind of the nature of the beast, the nature of the business. But you said there's more attention on the portal right now, and that's why it seems busier than it actually is. And when you talk about attention, somebody that got a lot of attention this season was Deion Sanders, and him getting to Colorado and essentially having a mass exodus of that team, turning it into what it was. And now all of a sudden it seems like year one is no different than year two, where everybody decided, well, this isn't what I expected it to be. What do you make of the mass turnover we saw before and after year one of Deion at Colorado? And do you think year two will spit out a similar outcome?
Well, I think that, he took over a football team that won one game the year before, so he thought he had to overhaul his roster quickly to be competitive. And college coaches are getting fired pretty quickly. Mississippi State's head guy didn't even make it through an entire season. So you got to win quickly to keep the natives happy with what's going on the field. And Deion Sanders is no exception to that rule. If they don't play well this season, all the good fanfare and well wishes and stuff that you're getting from a supportive fan base, they can turn on you on a dime. And so I would imagine that 4 wins certainly wasn't good enough for Coach Sanders, and he's a competitor, and they're going to hit the portal hard again to try and land guys to put together a season like Mel Tucker had at Michigan State a couple years ago, where they were portal heavy, got guys like Kenneth Walker, and found a way to win 11 ball games and play in a meaningful bowl game at the end of the season. Now that's not an easy recipe to duplicate, and I think that they certainly saw that they were not up to snuff at the point of attack. I mean, Colorado had some skilled players on both sides of the ball that were good, but they just could not hold up at the line of scrimmage, and that cost them in some close games that they had too that didn't go their way. So they'll be portal heavy. They've landed some offensive linemen this weekend. They had a good weekend on the recruiting trail and on the portal, but we'll see what happens when they get them in the program and develop them. And we'll see how his coaching staff comes together, as he's had turnover on the staff as well. But they're going to be competitive in the portal. They're going to land a lot of guys, and they're going to try and continue to overhaul a roster that's went from 1 win to 4 wins. And they're trying to win double-digit games. That's kind of what he's got his eye on. He's certainly not trying to be mediocre.
We're talking with Steve Wiltfong. He is the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports. Steve, I'm curious, with the transfer portal, how much has that kind of changed the nature of what you do? Obviously the recruiting websites used to be so heavily focused on high school recruiting, and they still are, but it's sort of added this whole other element to what people are looking for out of their recruiting websites. I'm just curious how you guys kind of handled that over the last few years as it became such a big deal.
Well, yeah, so 24/7 Sports is now ranking kids in the portal, and adding and those numbers add up to the overall class ranking. So you have an overall class ranking, you have a portal ranking, and you have a high school ranking. So you can see 3 different rankings. So diehard fans are very interested in roster construction for their favorite football teams, and just as much for their least favorite football teams. One thing I've learned is that the fans that are most passionate, they love rooting against the rival just as much as they love rooting for their own team sometimes. So, 24/7 Sports, we're trying to provide a projection of how talented we think your team is, but ultimately teams write their own scripts, players write their own stories, and recruiting rankings and portal rankings are just a preview. You still got to get in, you got to lift the weights, you got to eat the training table, you got to learn the scheme. Coaches got to scheme you into successful positions, and so we'll see what happens there. But obviously there's a lot of excitement around who's going where from the portal, and it's just kind of fascinating. I say this, guys, find yourself someone in life that loves you as much as personnel departments and college coaches love seeing offensive linemen in the portal with any kind of game experience. And it's just fascinating to me that a young man that maybe played 3 games at a lower level school, just the amount of love that they can get in the portal, even though they're probably still not going to be an all-conference player for you on the next level.
I was going to say, Steve, who's more coveted in the portal, the quarterback, the offensive lineman with any game experience or the edge rusher?
Yeah, so I think it obviously starts with quarterback, but I would put offensive line too.
It's pretty close.
I mean, like to find big bodies that can bend and move with game experience, it's a very coveted thing again. And the guy could have piss poor grade from like the games that he played in,
but he's just played it all.
But he played. So like, let's bring him in, man. We'll recruit him like a 6-star and try and get him to come here. And he'll probably a reason why he didn't grade well or play that much where he was at. But I mean, those guys are coveted in the portal though.
Steve, I've got a listener question for you, and it's a question that kind of goes to the point of the grass may not always be greener on the other side. The question is, I've always wanted to know how many guys enter the portal and have to go down a level, whether it's D1 FCS or D2, and how many guys basically get lost in the portal.
So a lot of guys do get lost in the portal. So there's levels to the portal. There are guys that go in the portal because they know that they're going to have great opportunity elsewhere to move up or move up financially. So you have that group of guys where they have representation and there's feelers out, and they know when they get in the portal that they are going to improve their situation from a prestige standpoint, and then typically that goes hand in hand with a financial standpoint. Then there are guys that go in the portal that maybe going down a level is a good thing, but they're still going to land on their feet and get to play more and get film and then have a better chance of getting evaluated by NFL front offices. So that's a good thing too. But there are a lot of guys that go into the portal and they don't have any kind of like compass. There's no schools that knew they were going in. They are just going in because they're not happy with their current situation. Those are the ones that are like risking drowning.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have like a feel for the lay of the land, you don't know what's going to happen. And so it's terrifying for those guys, because I know this: if you are a college athlete and a college football player and you just stay the course and graduate, there's a good chance that you can sell medical equipment and make about $300,000-$400,000 a year for the rest of your life. You just got to get through, man. You just got to get through. Someone needs to tell these guys that, hey, I know you're not starting. You might not even be on the second string, but darn it, if you graduate from this program, you just go get yourself a job at Stryker, man. They like hiring athletes, make about $350,000 a year. Join the country club, you'd be all right, but at the same time, these schools want to push those kids out too. If you're not contributing, and if you're not contributing in a positive manner as a player or just to the culture, they'd be happy to see you jump in the portal and replace you with somebody else. So it's almost, my advice would be, look, if no one knows you're going in the portal and you haven't played much, get your degree and go sell medical equipment. And if a school wants you to leave, you can leave as fast as you give me my bachelor's degree. So if you're not happy with me here, great. How can we hasten this process to me to get my degree so I can, apply to these sales companies that love hiring former athletes, because there are kids jumping in the portal that then won't graduate from college also. And so that's kind of the sad deal. And you sometimes see kids that are like at these prestigious academic schools that aren't playing, and they'll go in the portal and they'll end up at like a FCS school. And no disrespect, like people make great livings from every great college, but it's like, dude, you just left the school that has a track record of graduating over 90% of their players. So just go take your shot at a very small setting where the degree doesn't hold close to the same weight, and the connections and the alumni are nowhere near the same. It's just kind of disappointing to see that happen for some kids that when they arrived at college, they kind of got the world by the ball.
Steve, changing gears from transfer portal to kind of evaluating high school talent, here a little bit. One of the things that we've seen with Matt Rule, and I think he was doing this at Baylor too, but it's obviously a lot more prevalent for us in Nebraska now that he's here, but he goes out and he offers some guys that we do not have a ton of information on, both as fans and a lot of times even as recruiting services. How challenging is it to go out and then evaluate those guys when, previously maybe they only had FCS offers or they only had Division II offers or they were seen mostly as track guys? That's something that Matt Rule tends to do a lot. How do you go and evaluate those guys once they do get a Power 5 offer like Nebraska?
Right, from the high school ranks, you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of Matt Rule's secret sauce, right? Him and his staff.
Yeah.
He wouldn't say it's just him, but they believe in themselves as coaches, not just as like, hey, we got a strength and conditioning program and we're going to make you even more athletic, but like, we scheme you up right. We teach you how to play the game correctly. We put you in positions to be successful on Saturdays with your skill set. So they're just going out there looking for clay. And yeah, they look for athletic players, but they're also looking for guys with the right mentality to come in that want to learn and get better and fit the culture that they're trying to build. But yeah, and oftentimes these guys are good football players too. It's just Nebraska does a good job of like looking in every nook and cranny. And we see the guys they offer. What we don't see is probably the 100 to 200 guys that they evaluated that they didn't offer.
Mm-hmm.
So they're putting in the work, right? And you find some of these guys that rise on their board and get a late offer. They're the only Power 5 offer, but they probably, I bet you for every one guy they find, there's 15 guys that they put time in that they didn't offer. So it's a lot of man hours and a lot of grinding and sifting through players. And there's a lot of pride in the work in that personnel department with guys like Omar Hales, and the coaching staff is very involved, and Matt Rule is very involved. And they're not afraid to stamp a guy. They're not afraid to say, well, why hasn't so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so hasn't offered? If they like them, they offer. And they're not afraid to be first either, early in the cycle and say, well, if we offer him, he might get 15 other offers, or, look, we think he's good. We're offering him right now, and then we're going to build the best relationship with him with his staff in college football. So that's kind of their recipe. And again, Matt Rule's 2 for 2 at his last 2 jobs in college football, 2 places that were tough jobs. Temple historically didn't have anywhere close to the success Matt Rule did, and then Baylor. When Matt Rule got to Baylor, they were in the gutter. So he's 2 for 2 on the college ranks of his last 2 jobs, and Nebraska is a great place with some of the best fans in the land, the best support, and the infrastructure's there. So they didn't have the season they wanted to this year again, but I still think the arrow is very much up on Nebraska Husker football.
Steve, I've always been curious about this in terms of where a team sits in coordination with the upcoming class rankings. So, for example, the Huskers are 22nd in the class of 2024 rankings, according to 24/7. And, it's always because Nebraska kind of sits in this window a lot. And my question is, how do you get to that next tier? How do you get a part of the 5-star tier, the top 10 in program rankings, the ones that are always seemingly competing for a national championship? And I know those are huge aspirations to ask and expect from a staff that's just in year 2, but how does Nebraska take that leap? Do they have to physically get there on the football field? You see the results and then you see the traction in the recruiting rankings, or can you actually get there without competing for a national championship?
Well, I just don't think you're going to live in a world where Nebraska's recruiting top 5, top 10 recruiting classes, but you can live in a world where they land Carter Nelson, the number 1 player in state, and beat Georgia and Notre Dame for him, or Grant Bricks, the number 1 player in Iowa, and beat Oklahoma, among many others for him. And then landing, I know people focus in on the blue chippers, but it's Nebraska going into the Lone Star State and beating TCU and Baylor for a guy that ends up being a future pro. And I think you kind of look at like what Gary Patterson did at TCU or Mark D'Antonio did at Michigan State, where they had so many seasons where they won 11 or more ball games. I think Gary Patterson won 11 games like over 8 times, And so Mark D'Antonio had a stretch where they won at least 11, 5 years in a row. And they would land a couple highly ranked prospects a cycle. But really, it was about landing their kind of guys, high upside, chip on their shoulder, and then coaching them up, just having a schematic advantage most weeks because you got the best damn coaching staff, and you got a great strength and conditioning program, and your program's edgy, hard-nosed, tough, physical. And whenever they step on the field on Saturday, they're not, they're the ones doing the pushing around at the point of attack, and they're the ones with the speed on the perimeter. And so I think that's Nebraska's recipe, is to win the blue chip battles that are attainable, and then go out there and that second tier recruiting, you're still putting in as much time and effort to beat Baylor, TCU, or whoever you're going toe to toe with, Iowa, for a guy that's got a future in an NFL future. You're putting in the same amount of man hours Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State are for that 5-star. And then it's up to you to get the most out of them. And that's the recipe I see for a place like Nebraska. Those great years that Gary Patterson had. And I hope people aren't like rolling their eyes at that because they are remembering the last 4 years of the Gary Patterson era. I mean, if you look from like 2005 to 2011, I mean, Gary Patterson was arguably the best head coach in college football. I mean, they went to Rose Bowls and Fiesta Bowls under his watch, and they were ranked in the top 5 and during that stretch. And Mark D'Antonio took Michigan State to the college football playoff and beat Ohio State a couple times during that run and owned Michigan. I mean, that's a hell of a recipe and not easy to reproduce. But I do think Matt Rule has shown that he can be among the best coaches in college football with what he's done. And now he's at a place with even more resources. I think he can be a consistent winner with time.
That's Steve Wiltfong, Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports.
Great
Steve,
answer.
Great stuff there this morning. We appreciate your time, and keep busy out there, all right?
Yep, take care, man. Appreciate y'all having me on.
Hey, thank you, Steve.
That's Steve Wiltfong from 24/7 Sports, Director of Recruiting. Awesome stuff from Steve there. Coming up next, we're going to get to our Warhorse Sportsbook Sports Cleanup. Tons of stuff we haven't gotten to yet today. Including what we'll talk to our last guest about, Steve Gardner from USA Today, Shohei Ohtani.
Something happened in baseball?
A little bit. We might have to touch on that here in the next couple segments on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome into the Warhorse Sportsbook Sports Cleanup here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with you.
Hello.
We are on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. As we get kicked off with this sports cleanup, a little bit of breaking high school news here around the metro. Millard North has named Alan Burrell their new head football coach, replacing the legendary Fred Petito. That just came down basically as soon as we went to break. Our own Mike Sauter broke that news on Twitter. So congratulations to Coach Burrell, and good luck to you as I hope my Mustangs return to glory soon.
Well, he was a part of that glory.
He was
a part of that state championship trio, right?
Yeah, he was part of 3 as an assistant from 08 to 15.
Right. So, he's a piece of what Millard North greatness looks like. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a huge piece into him returning, knowing that he was sort of kind of groomed by Coach Petito as well. Like, that has to feel good, knowing that you're Millard North and saying like, okay, like if we're looking for somebody to be a so-called understudy, like that's what Burrell is.
Yeah. Well, and you like a guy that obviously has some Millard North ties and kind of understands what that place is all about. So congratulations to Coach on getting that job. I know it's a job that he really, really wanted from the people that I talked to. He'd been at Mount Michael for the last couple of years as their head coach, and he will start as Millard North's head coach this upcoming season. So a little bit of breaking news there. But there's a lot of other stuff that was going on this weekend that we haven't quite got to yet. First, we're going to get to Shohei Ohtani with Steve Gardner, so I don't want to get into him too much here. But just your initial thoughts. I don't think the Dodgers part was too surprising. I know a lot of the tea leaves had been pointing to the Blue Jays, and those fans lost their ever-loving minds when it came out that he was going to the Dodgers. Not just that he was going to the Dodgers, but we talked about this on Friday. You go, oh, man, there's planes going here. And I was like, you know where the planes are. You don't know who's on them. Turns out it was not Shohei Ohtani on those planes to Toronto.
He could have been on the plane, but it may not have been to sign a deal. It's just, of all the teams, man, the Dodgers,
it makes sense though. He didn't want to move.
I know, but we talk about the Dodgers all the time as the team that just ends up getting
everybody.
Yeah, they build this so-called super team, which good for them for doing.
Yeah.
And that's a part of not having a salary cap in baseball. But, if they're going to spend the money, you might as well spend the money in ways like this. But, man, why couldn't another team just step up to the dish and say, no, it's going to be me? Now, how many other teams are offering $700 million? Because the price tag was $600 million. At least that's what was being reported. So there could be the Giants out there that offered $600. The Toronto Blue Jays could have offered $650 million, and then the Dodgers just swoop in and offer $700. And good for them. If you got to buck up to get who you want. I've been saying that with Nebraska.
Yes,
you got to do that too in Major League Baseball. You want the best player in baseball, you go about doing it that way. But how laughable is it, man, that the Angels got absolutely nothing in return for Shohei Ohtani? You had every opportunity to trade him mid-season.
Yeah, at the deadline.
And you had every opportunity to re-sign him when he became a free agent.
Yeah.
Yet they didn't pull the trigger.
Yeah.
You didn't get any piece, no sort of pieces in return. You could have traded him to a team that was making a playoff run. Let's just say the Atlanta Braves. You could have gotten prospects in return for him, whether it was 2, 3, 4. You could have gotten a named guy right now that could slot in and be your, third baseman because Anthony Rendon can't stay healthy. And boom, you have pieces now to where then you go back into the offseason and say, hey, Shohei, remember how we made this this deal to move you here? Now we have all these guys to build to be competitive playoff team. How about you come on back home and do it with us? But no, the Angels did angel things.
Yeah,
decided to hold on to him, and then got nothing in return. And dude, that is a wasteland for Major League Baseball players. You go there to die.
Yeah, it's a dumpster fire of a franchise. If you can't win anything with Trout and Ohtani on your team, you're not going to win anything probably in the near future or the distant future or anytime at all. It's a poorly run franchise for sure. I do want to kind of focus on the Ohtani part of it here a little bit though, because I don't know that's I understand how good Shohei Ohtani is. I don't know how good of a signing this is for the Dodgers, because I get that they're deferring some of the money so the tax implications aren't as aggressive,
which isn't uncommon. We've seen deals with Scherzer. Betts and Freeman did deals like that with the Dodgers to avoid competitive tax balance.
So it's something that they've been doing, but you're committing so much money to a guy who at the end of this deal is going to be 40, has had a really hard time staying healthy as is. And sure, he can still DH and stuff while he's going through, but he's not going to pitch till 2025,
right? And how you're paying him to pitch and hit?
Yeah,
you're not paying
$700 million.
hit.
$700 million is for the combo deal, right? You're not paying $700 million for DH Shohei Ohtani. You're not paying $700 million for just pitcher Shohei
Ohtani. This is his second Tommy John surgery, so wear and tear on the body, what that can do. Now maybe he'll be like Nick Chubb, and no matter what lower body injury hits Nick Chubb, he'll still play football and be 100%. But the wear and tear on somebody's arm, a major league pitcher's arm, a guy that's throwing 98, 99 consecutively, 5 days off, you do it, 5 days off, you do it. And he's doing it for 9 innings. Shohei doesn't come out of games. Shohei gets 7 to 9 innings.
Yeah.
and he's striking guys out, which means he's going
high
deep
pitch
into
counts.
ball games, and he's got high pitch count.
Yeah, I don't know. And listen, if the Red Sox had signed him, I'd have been thrilled. Like, I'm not going to pretend like that. I'm not. But if they had signed him for $700 million, I'd have gotten a little queasy. I'd have been like, I don't know how I feel about that. If you don't care about the payroll implications, the tax implications, whatever, that's totally fine. I just look at that and I go, man, you could get a lot of really good players for $700 million.
Mm-hmm. You could build a really, really strong team.
You're talking like 3 or 4 superstars.
That's why I'm interested to know what the deferrals actually are.
Yeah.
How much is he getting paid per season? Because what it looks like on paper is 1 year, $70 million.
Yeah, which I know is not the case. I just don't know what they said. All I heard was Jeff Passan reported, I think, either most or a majority. So you have to figure it's less than 35 a year that he's getting. I don't know what that number actually is, but man, you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, and it's kind of been a fragile basket. So you have to say,
but he's worth it right now, and that's how
if he's healthy, he's worth it,
right?
And if
you have to take into consideration,
betting on him being healthy for how long? You have to get 7 of those 10 years at a high level for it to be worth it. Like, you can eat 2 or 3 on the back end and feel okay. You probably have to get 7 good years out of him, which means one of those years pitching next year is already evaporated because he's not pitching next year. So you got to ask him to be a quality pitcher through 37, 38 years old. It's a big ask. Listen, again, if the Red Sox had signed him, I'd have been thrilled. But as you can remove yourself from the situation, you look at it and go, man, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but did you want to see him on the Dodgers?
No, Blue Jays would have been more fun.
Yeah, but take the Red Sox out of the equation. I'll take the Cardinals out of the equation.
I think Blue Jays would have been more fun.
Out of all the teams, like I think I would have been more okay with him being a Yankee.
Ooh, I'll pass on the Yankees.
See, I think I would have been more okay with that than the Dodgers. Now, granted, I have to see the Dodgers more than I see the Yankees.
Yeah.
But still, it's just the Dodgers being able to get everybody and anybody and whenever they want to, which they spend to get them. So, again, don't get me wrong.
Right.
There's a reason that they get guys like that. It's just like, man, like, why couldn't you be I don't want to say like a Rocky because, like,
honestly, I think it would have been super fun if he had gone to either the Orioles or the Blue Jays.
Right, like a team that is in playoff contention as a young
would
core.
Be crappy for me because I'd have to face him all the time as an opponent as a Red Sox fan. But like or like Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks are really young. They were really competitive. Like one of those teams that kind of built from within, and he'd sort of be just the cherry on top of what they've done would have been a lot cooler.
We'll have to see, though, if pitching doesn't hold up, you're going to have to get use out of him in the field in some way, shape, or form.
And that's
which would put him in the outfield most likely.
Yeah, which is not going to be any easier on the arm.
Can he route run? Like that's really what I'm curious about. You put him in right field, that's where he's going to have to go. But is he somebody that can read a ball off the wall? Is he somebody that can chase down a ball into the corner and not allow a player to go from second to third? Those are things to think about.
We can ask all those questions of Steve Gardner from USA Today coming up next. Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me as well. And we are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by Steve Gardner. He covers baseball for the USA Today. Just a reminder, Warhorse Sportsbook, the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bet, either at the casino in Lincoln or at Horseman's Park here in Omaha. Steve, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Good, Steve. Are doing terrific. Always good to talk baseball in the middle of December here. Big fan. Our guy Shohei Ohtani gave us plenty of reason to do so. The Dodgers gave him plenty of reasons to stay in Los Angeles. I guess so. The thing that I'm most curious about this deal, Steve, is do you have any indication that other teams were in the neighborhood of what he ended up getting, or did the Dodgers kind of get played here?
I don't think so. I mean, there was some momentum, at least at some part over the weekend, to feel like the Blue Jays were at least a serious bidder in all of this. But the Dodgers are the ones that have the financial wherewithal to blow anybody out of the water. And they were going. If the Blue Jays went to 700, I think the Dodgers would have gone to 800 million. It was one of those types of things. So they were not letting him go. It seems like the Dodgers had made this a strategy for several years in advance in waiting for him to become a free agent, and it was just a matter of time until they closed the deal.
Steve, how did the Angels move on from Shohei? Like, what is Mike Trout's future? What's the future of that team? And do you ever envision the Angels actually having star players on this team and making a playoff run?
Yeah, I don't know. It's when you have Trout and Ohtani on the same team and you can't make the playoffs, that says a lot for your roster construction. And I know that Perry Manassian, the GM there, said that he was not going to trade Mike Trout. I think if you're the Angels and you have any chance of getting back to the playoffs anytime soon, maybe you have to reconsider that, because, I mean, he takes up such a huge chunk of the payroll that they're willing to spend. And, he's been hurt. The injuries have hurt the team, and not having him on the field while still paying him, a huge amount of money helps, or doesn't help at all. You construct the rest of the team around him to be competitive, and especially with what we've seen with the Angels and the Astros and the Mariners. Those teams are always going to be pretty good, at least for the next few years. It's a very tall order to get the Angels back to the postseason.
We're talking with Steve Gardner of USA Today, baseball writer. Steve, what does this mean for the Dodgers in terms of, they've kind of had some early exits. They've been a little bit frustrated with those, I know. What does this mean for them and their ability to get over that hump and make it further into the playoffs?
Well, one thing it doesn't help, at least for this season, is it doesn't help the problems they have with starting pitching.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they really need to address. And they're in the mix for Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who is the number one free agent that's now left on the market after Ohtani signed. But there are also several other highly motivated suitors for him as well. So I think the Dodgers, one of the things that they have still an advantage is that they have a very deep farm system. So it may not be that, they flex more financial muscle. It may be that they go the trade route and maybe trade from some of that strength in their farm system to get a Dylan Cease or somebody along Corbin Burns or somebody like that to be able to front the rotation, because they're not going to have Clayton Kershaw because he's not going to be healthy until midseason. And I think he's still a free agent anyway, so they need to re-sign him, but I think that would be easy enough. But you've got Walker Buehler coming back. Maybe he's your number one guy, but he missed all of last year. Bobby Miller looked good last year, but he's a rookie. Ryan Pepio, also a rookie. I mean, you've got to go pretty deep. Emmett Sheehan, also another rookie from last year. Mm-hmm. You've got to go pretty deep. And after that, there's not a whole lot there. So the Dodgers definitely have a starting pitching problem that they'll need to address the rest of this offseason. Steve,
that's not the only move that has been made this offseason. Some other big names have been on the market, and that one being Juan Soto, and he made his way to New York. He now fills out that Yankees outfield that also got Verdugo in a deal with the Red Sox. So now you have Judge, Verdugo, you have Soto, you can keep Stanton in that DH role. If they can get healthy pitching, because as you were just talking about with the Dodgers, what they need is healthy pitching in New York. Where do you see the Yankees going this season?
Yeah, I think the Yankees have a definite contender there. I mean, Garrett Cole, obviously, Cy Young winner at the top of the rotation, is a great foundational piece. But you mentioned the health. Carlos Rodon has to be healthy. Nestor Cortez has to be healthy. And the Yankees are going to be players on the free agent market and possibly the trade market this offseason. So they're looking, at possibly Yamamoto and some other guys that are free agents. I think the Yankees certainly want to be a player, and, not being
in the World Series mix, not having a championship for this storied franchise since 2009. Brian Cashman's under a lot of heat to produce. And I know we kind of seems like we say that every year for the last few years, but I think it's really true this time. And now that he has made the trade for Juan Soto, that is certainly a plus for him. It makes the Yankees a much stronger team offensively, and now he's just got to find a way to win in one of the toughest divisions in baseball.
We're talking with Steve Gardner of USA Today. Steve, a couple of big names on the move. You already mentioned Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani. You mentioned the free agent market a little bit. Do you see any other potential big names on the move this offseason?
It sounds like the Brewers aren't going to move Corbin Burns, and that's probably a smart move, I guess, for them. But yeah, I'd like to see some more of the dominoes in the free agent world, fall, and then we can start thinking more along the lines of trades. Lucas Giolito might be a guy that some teams would look as a high upside guy that maybe, they could get for a discounted price since he didn't have such a huge season last year. It's usually we see the winter meetings sort of kick things off, and with Ohtani not signing, it was one of the strangest winter meetings I think we've seen in the last several years. And that's one of the things. It's hard to say what comes next, I think, is the big thing. So in terms of having a crystal ball, that's not my specialty. It's more along the lines of seeing what happens and then going with what we know for certain rather than speculating.
Well, something that we've seen play out, and we mentioned the Yankees and their moves with Soto and Verdugo. That Verdugo trade more or less kind of closes the book on the Mookie Betts and Dodgers Red Sox trade. Is that trade an F or an F- for the Red Sox in retrospect?
Yes, it's no longer incomplete for sure. And yes, F-. I
was gonna say, it really can't get any worse. Like, it's a generationally bad trade, right?
Exactly. And we see that, how Betts has flourished with the Dodgers. The Red Sox are left with nothing except some payroll flexibility,
Oh, thank God, which they've used to great success.
Exactly. And so,
I'm not bitter. It's fine.
It's not a bright spot in Boston's storied history. But it's something you gotta move on. You've got to look ahead. And if you're Boston, again, the toughest division of all of baseball, and you're looking up, it's not getting much better. So I think the Red Sox did get Tyler O'Neill, though. I mean,
they did.
They're trying. They're adding players, and maybe he can find what made him so successful in St. Louis, hitting balls off that green monster.
Hey, Steve, quickly here. Got about a minute left. I have to selfishly ask about the Cardinals now because you brought them up. They got old and will stay old in the starting pitching department, although there are some big names there. Lance Lynn comes back. You obviously had Sonny Gray. What did you make of what the Cardinals have done so far to improve the starting rotation?
Well, I think Sonny Gray is certainly a huge get for them, and he will give some stability. You kind of feel like he will be that number one guy that they've kind of been lacking for a while, I guess, since maybe Jack Flaherty's big year. But, John Mozeliak went out and said he needed to get 3 starting pitchers, and he did it, before the end of the calendar year. So it's a feather in their cap. They know what they have now, and they can go and look for improvements elsewhere. I think it's a good offseason already for the Cardinals.
That's Steve Gardner. He covers baseball for USA Today. Steve, thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it. Sounds good, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
That's Steve Gardner on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. That's all for the show today. That's Andrew Rogers. I'm Ravi Lulla. We will be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio tomorrow.